Can you answer the question, sir?
I'm answering the question. You're questioning the integrity of the Deputy Director of the
Asking
FBI
you
and mine.
if you found any
and I'm going to
evidence.
answer the question.
I'm
The pipe bomb
asking-
investigation is ongoing, and I'm not going to discuss the
Ongoing?
details of the pipe bomb investigation. Mr. Bongino was a Secret Service agent for 15 years, a police officer for 5. I served this country in multiple administrations for 16 years. We were also private citizens, and we are now back in government service. And what we have the ability to do is set aside our personal beliefs to deliver the mission of justice for this country, and we're doing it day in and day out. And I find it disgusting that everyone and anyone would jettison our 31 years of combined experience that is now at the helm of the FBI, delivering historic results at historic speeds for the American people.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to America First, Patriots. Today we're diving deep into what might be one of the most important congressional hearings of this administration. Before we get started, make sure you smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring that notification bell because we're bringing you the truth that the mainstream media won't tell you. And if you want to support real patriotic content and help us keep fighting for America, head over to patreon.com/AmericaFirst where you can support us for as low as $5 a month. Every dollar helps us stay independent and keep bringing you the unfiltered truth. Today, we're breaking down the explosive testimony from FBI Director Kash Patel as he faced off against Senator Dick Durbin in what can only be described as a masterclass in how the deep state establishment tries to attack real patriots who are cleaning house in our federal agencies. What we witnessed here was nothing short of a coordinated attack on one of the most qualified and patriotic leaders we've had in the FBI in decades, and I'm going to tell you exactly why this hearing proves that we're over the target.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, in addition to the extensive purge of nonpartisan career FBI official reports indicate that dozens of remaining officials have been subjected to polygraph exams to test their loyalty. My understanding is that approximately 40 officials have been asked to sit for a polygraph during your administration, and several have been asked whether they have ever made negative comments about you. Director Patel, FBI agents pledge their loyalty to the Constitution of the United States, not you personally. What is the basis for requiring polygraph exams of your workforce and asking them if they've made negative comments about you?
I don't know what reports you're referring to, Ranking Member, and I reject any reporting that has false information in it, so I'm not going to respond to that. As far as polygraphs go, generally they are always and always have been utilized at the FBI to track down those that leak sensitive information and have unauthorized disclosures to the media, and we will continue to use them to ensure the integrity of the FBI.
Did any individual on your senior executive team, the director's advisory team, or who serve in the positions on the 7th floor receive disqualifying alerts on their polygraphs?
Senator, I'm not going to get into the personnel discussions that were had on a polygraph. Those are private discussions, and many of them relate to ongoing investigations.
Did you or Attorney General Bondi provide any individual with a waiver so they could remain employed after they received disqualifying alerts on their polygraphs?
I'll have to get back to you.
You don't remember that?
No, sir. My priority is protecting the American public, not getting into the weeds of polygraphs.
And to have a decent memory when you come before a committee.
I'm happy to talk about all the good work the men and women of the FBI are doing, including provided the lowest crime rate in American history. If you want to talk about how to protect the citizens, Chicago has seen a 30% reduction in its murder rate because of the men and women of the FBI.
You take credit for that?
I'll happily do that.
You
the
take
interagency partners and the men and women of the Chicago PD have never been more
include
powerful.
local law enforcement, please.
Have you ever seen my testimony across this country where I always lead with our interagency partnerships with state and local law enforcement? It is the pillar of what I am doing. And on the 7th floor, for the first time in FBI history, I have installed police officers and sheriffs right on my 7th floor to report to us every day what's going around the country on the street level, because that is a priority of the FBI and is the only way we are going to work. I don't take credit for anything, but I will defend the men and women of the FBI and the cops that help us get it done.
You should. Director Patel, to your knowledge, did a whistleblower ever make a disclosure to Attorney General Bondi indicating that the New York field office was withholding Epstein-related records?
I'm not familiar with that whistleblower.
You know that there was such a whistleblower?
I'm not familiar with that whistleblower.
In response to the blowback she received, Attorney General Bondi also pushed the FBI to review approximately 100,000 Epstein-related records on an arbitrarily short deadline in March, and the FBI was directed to flag any documents that mentioned President Trump. Nothing came of that review until July, when DOJ and FBI released an unsigned memorandum stating there is no incriminating client list. Why was this July 7th memorandum unsigned?
Would you prefer I've used AutoPen?
Well, why was it
The
unsigned?
memorandum had the insignia of the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And in our effort to secure transparency for the American people, because the 3 prior administrations had not done so, we conducted an exhaustive search of everything related to the Epstein cases, and we produced what was legally and permissibly able to be produced to Congress and the American public.
So
And
did
there's
you
a congressional
did you-
subpoena, and we're continuing to do
You
so.
personally direct that investigation so that you would sign such a,
Did I personally direct what investigation?
of the Epstein records for any reference to President Trump?
Again, you are citing reporting that I think is baseless. We conducted an investigation of the Epstein case files pursuant to the direction of the President of the administration to provide all credible information, and we are working with Congress pursuant to a congressional subpoena to turn over all the documents we can. All
at-
individuals.
Who
were
at
cited.
DOJ and FBI was responsible for its drafting and conclusions?
Many individuals at the Department of Justice and the FBI are
There was
responsible.
no lead person?
The Attorney General leads the Department of Justice, and I lead the FBI.
So the Attorney General was responsible for that?
The Attorney General leads the Department of Justice.
Director Patel, much like you, Deputy Director Dan Bongino was a conspiracy theorist who built a lucrative career making inflammatory and unsubstantiated statements about the FBI that would be disqualifying in any administration that cared about nonpartisan law enforcement. For instance, Mr. Bongino called the placement of pipe bombs outside the DNC and RNC headquarters on January 6, quote, an inside job, and went on to say this was a setup. I have zero doubt, and whoever goes into the FBI, you better get an answer about why. Director Patel, you and Deputy Director Bongino are now leading the FBI. What is the evidence to suggest the pipe bombs placed outside of the DNC and RNC on January 6 were an inside job?
I appreciate the opportunity to discuss Director Bongino's mind record. So many on this committee and the media jettison our 31 years of public service
Can
prior
you
to
answer
taking.
the question, sir?
I'm answering the question. You're questioning the integrity of the Deputy Director of the
Asking
FBI
you
and
if
mine.
you found
And
any
I'm going to
evidence.
answer the question.
I'm
The pipe
asking-
bomb investigation is ongoing, and I'm not going to discuss the
Ongoing?
details of the pipe bomb investigation. Mr. Bongino was a Secret Service agent for 15 years, a police officer for 5. I served this country in multiple administrations for 16 years. We were also private citizens, and we are now back in government service. And what we have the ability to do is set aside our personal beliefs to deliver the mission of justice for this country, and we're doing it day in and day out. And I find it disgusting that everyone and anyone would jettison our 31 years of combined experience that is now at the helm of the FBI, delivering historic results at historic speeds for the American people.
So you have no evidence?
I got a lot of evidence, and I'll give it to you when I can.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. There's a New York Times story this morning about Chris Meyer. As I understand it, he was your personal pilot, at least for some period of time. Mr. Meyer has quite a record himself. Flew over 350 hours as an Air Force pilot on 3 aircraft types in Afghanistan. Mr. Jardina, another former FBI agent, a 1999 graduate of U.S. Naval Academy, commanded 100 Marines in combat during the 2003 invasion of Iraq, participated in several firefights, followed up with 2011 deployment as reservist to Afghanistan, where he interrogated senior Taliban officials. It appears that you terminated these 2 agents. Why?
I'm not going to get into personnel decisions that we made.
So you're not accountable for your decisions to take people who served our country so admirably and terminate them without any cause?
That's a one-sided story. Anyone that has
Well,
been
then
terminated from
so
the
tell
FBI,
your-
generally
tell your side
speaking,
of the story.
failed to meet the needs of the FBI and uphold their constitutional duties. And you providing a one-sided story from your perch is absolutely disgraceful, because the men and women of the FBI deserve better. And your attack on the current leadership of the men and women of the FBI is equally disgraceful, because now you're attacking the leaders that are our brave SACs in
Let me
the
tell
field
you what's
who are
disgraceful.
doing the job that this
Disgraceful.
country needs.
It's
And we will
disgraceful.
continue to do it.
Excuse me, it's disgraceful when Mr. Meyer and Mr. Jardina, who served our country so well, are terminated apparently because of the rants of a broadcaster.
That is
all
your
it-
opinion. It is not a fact.
Well, it's certainly, my opinion, I can back up with fact. Let me ask you to explain the situation in Baltimore, if you will. Did you read the story about the termination of the project in Baltimore?
Which story?
764 Group?
Sorry. Which story?
764 Group, the Baltimore agents were investigating. Are you familiar with that?
No, sir.
Well, I'm not going to go into detail. It would take too long to do it. But apparently that this group, 764, a nihilistic, violent extremist group, seeks to blackmail children to perform vile acts on a camera under investigation by Baltimore, which was terminated by you. I'd like you to respond in writing, if you will, as to the circumstances of that termination.
Sure. Our operations against NVEs, as you're referring to, has been historically high, and we've taken down multiple NVE rings, including 764 rings, who are harming children and causing them to be mutilated and
Last question,
suicide.
can you explain why you are eliminating the requirements for a college degree for your agents?
I appreciate the opportunity to address that. You said in your opening statement, we are reducing the training requirements at Quantico. We are not, we are expanding them. You are referring to an 1811 crossover program because I believe the men and women of places like the DEA, the ATF, and the Marshal Service and the Secret Service who want to work at the FBI should deserve that opportunity in a shortened bridge program, which we provided. We are also keeping the 18-week BFTC as is traditionally being held at the FBI. So we're not reducing any requirements. We are increasing those that we bring into the FBI.
Did you change any of the requirements on college degrees?
We are allowing police officers who have served for a number of years to come into the FBI who did not obtain the requisite college degree to apply to be federal agents because we feel they have the street-level experience we need to conduct this mission.
I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Let me start by saying something that needs to be said loud and clear. Kash Patel is exactly what we need in the FBI. This man has served our country for 16 years across multiple administrations. He's worked in the intelligence community, he's worked in defense, and he knows exactly where the bodies are buried in the deep state apparatus that has been weaponized against the American people for far too long. When President Trump appointed him to clean up the FBI, he knew exactly what he was doing, and what we're seeing from senators like Dick Durbin is pure panic from establishment. Now, let's talk about this polygraph controversy that Durbin tried to manufacture. Listen to what he's claiming. He says that approximately 40 FBI officials have been subjected to polygraph exams to test their loyalty, and that several have been asked whether they've made negative comments about Director Patel personally. The way Durbin frames this, you'd think Patel is running some kind of personal loyalty cult inside the FBI. But here's what Durbin conveniently leaves out and what Director Patel correctly pointed out in his response. Polygraphs have always been used in the FBI to track down leaks and unauthorized disclosures to the media. Always. This isn't some new authoritarian tool that Patel invented. This is standard operating procedure when you're trying to find out who's been running to the Washington Post and CNN with classified information to damage the administration. And let me tell you something, Patriots, the fact that 40 people needed to be polygraphed tells you everything you need to know about the state of the FBI when Patel took over. 40 people. That's not a small problem. That's a systemic issue with leakers and saboteurs embedded throughout the organization. Think about what we know happened during the Trump administration. We had FBI agents literally texting each other about insurance policies against Trump winning the election. We had the Russia hoax that was perpetrated by people in the highest levels of the FBI. We had the Hunter Biden laptop story suppressed right before the 2020 election with FBI involvement. And now we're supposed to be outraged that the new director is using standard investigative tools to find out who's been leaking sensitive information. Give me a break. When Durbin asks about disqualifying alerts on polygraphs for senior executives, Patel rightfully refuses to get into personnel discussions. This is basic operational security. You don't discuss the details of ongoing investigations or personnel matters in open congressional hearings where foreign adversaries are watching every word. But notice how Durbin tries to make this sound sinister, like Patel is hiding something nefarious, when in reality, he's following proper protocols. And then we get to the part where Patel starts talking about results, and this is where it gets really interesting. He mentions that we're seeing the lowest crime rate in American history. Chicago has seen a 30% reduction in its murder rate. 30%. In Chicago. Let that sink in. This is a city that has been a war zone for decades, and under Patel's leadership, working with local law enforcement, they've achieved a 30% reduction in murders. But does Durbin want to talk about that? Of course not. He wants to focus on process questions and manufactured controversies. This brings me to one of the most important points Patel made during this entire hearing. He talked about how he's installed police officers and sheriffs right on the 7th floor of the FBI for the first time in the organization's history. These are people who report daily on what's happening at the street level across the country. Do you understand how revolutionary this is? For decades, the FBI has been run by bureaucrats who have never walked a beat, never made an arrest, never dealt with real crime in real communities. They've been isolated in their ivory tower in Washington, making decisions based on political considerations rather than what's actually happening on the ground. Patel is changing that. He's bringing street cops, real law enforcement officers, into the highest levels of FBI leadership so that decisions are being made by people who understand what it's like to actually fight crime. This is exactly the kind of reform we've been demanding for years, and it's happening under his leadership. Now let's talk about the Epstein records issue, because this is where things get really interesting and where you can see the establishment's priorities on full display. Durbin brings up questions about Epstein-related records, whistleblowers, and whether the FBI was directed to flag documents that mention President Trump. Think about this for a minute. We finally have an FBI director who's actually willing to be transparent about the Epstein case, something that 3 prior administrations refused to do, and instead of praising this transparency, Durbin is trying to turn it into a scandal. Patel clearly states that they conducted an exhaustive search of everything related to the Epstein cases and produced what was legally and permissibly able to be produced to Congress and the American public. They're working with Congress pursuant to a congressional subpoena to turn over documents. This is exactly what we want. We want transparency. We want to know what the government knew about Epstein and his network. We want accountability. But when a patriotic director actually delivers that transparency, the establishment tries to turn it into a weapon against him. The unsigned memorandum issue is particularly telling. Durbin makes a big deal about why the July 7th memorandum stating there was no incriminating client list was unsigned, as if this is some kind of smoking gun. But Patel's response is perfect. He asks if Durbin would prefer he use an autopen, pointing out the absurdity of the question. The memorandum had the official insignia of both the Department of Justice and the FBI. It was an official document. The fact that it wasn't personally signed by Patel doesn't make it any less legitimate or official. What this really shows is that the establishment is so desperate to find something, anything, to attack Patel with that they're reduced to questioning whether documents are signed in the right way. This is the kind of bureaucratic nitpicking that Americans are sick of. We don't care about autopen versus personal signatures. We care about results. We care about whether the FBI is actually fighting crime and protecting Americans, and all the evidence shows that under Patel's leadership, they are. Then we get to the January 6th pipe bomb issue, and this is where Durbin really shows his hand. He attacks Deputy Director Bonino for calling the pipe bomb placement an inside job and asking legitimate questions about the investigation. But here's the thing, Patriots. These are legitimate questions. We're over 2 years removed from January 6th, and we still don't have answers about who placed those pipe bombs. We don't have arrests. We don't have prosecutions. We have surveillance footage that the FBI won't release. We have questions about the timeline that don't add up. When law enforcement professionals with decades of experience look at this case and say something doesn't add up, that's not conspiracy theorizing, that's professional skepticism based on experience and evidence. Bonino served as a Secret Service agent for 15 years and a police officer for 5 years. That's 20 years of law enforcement experience. When someone with that background looks at a case and says something seems off, maybe we should listen instead of dismissing them as conspiracy theorists. Patel's defense of Bonino was perfect. He pointed out that they have 31 years of combined public service between them. 31 years. And what does the establishment do? They try to dismiss and jettison that experience because these men are willing to ask tough questions and demand accountability. This is exactly the kind of principled leadership we need in federal law enforcement. The personnel termination issue that Durbin raises is particularly disgusting. He brings up Chris Meyer and another agent, both decorated military veterans with exemplary service records, and tries to make it sound like Patel terminated them without cause. But notice how Patel responds. He points out that Durbin is providing a one-sided story and that anyone who has been terminated from the FBI generally fails to meet the needs of the organization and uphold their constitutional duties. This is important, Patriots. Just because someone has military service doesn't mean they're automatically qualified to work in the FBI or that they can't be terminated for cause. We don't know the full story of why these individuals were terminated, but we do know that Patel has been tasked with cleaning up an organization that was thoroughly corrupted under previous leadership. Sometimes that means making hard personnel decisions. Sometimes that means removing people who might have impressive resumes but who aren't committed to the mission of the organization. The suggestion that these terminations were based on the rants of a broadcaster is typical establishment thinking. They can't conceive of the possibility that decisions might be made based on performance, integrity, or commitment to the mission. They assume that any personnel action must be based on political considerations because that's how they operate. Let's talk about the Baltimore investigation issue briefly. Durbin brings up something called the 764 Group, described as a violent extremist organization targeting children, and suggests that an investigation was terminated inappropriately. Patel's response is professional and appropriate. He doesn't get into operational details in an open hearing, but he makes it clear that operations against violent extremist groups have been historically high under his leadership, and that they've taken down multiple rings harming children. This is exactly how a professional law enforcement leader should respond. You don't discuss ongoing operations in public hearings. You don't compromise investigations by revealing details that could help criminals evade capture. But you do reassure the public that the work is being done and that results are being achieved. Finally, let's address the education requirements issue. Durbin tries to make it sound like Patel is lowering standards by eliminating college degree requirements for some agent positions. But listen to Patel's actual explanation. He's allowing experienced police officers who have served for years to apply to be federal agents even if they don't have college degrees because they have street-level experience that's valuable for the FBI's mission. This makes perfect sense. We've all seen what happens when you prioritize credentials over competence. We've seen how the emphasis on college degrees has created a class of bureaucrats who know theory but have never dealt with reality. A police officer who spent 10 years on the streets dealing with violent crime, drug trafficking, and organized criminal activity might not have a college degree, but they have experience and skills that are directly relevant to FBI work. At the same time, Patel is expanding training requirements at Quantico, not reducing them. He's creating crossover programs for experienced law enforcement officers from other federal agencies while maintaining the traditional 18-week training program. This isn't about lowering standards, it's about recognizing different types of valuable experience and creating pathways for the best people to serve in the FBI regardless of their educational background. What we saw in this hearing was a perfect encapsulation of the battle between the America First movement and the deep state establishment. On one side, you have Kash Patel, a patriot with 16 years of government service, who's delivering real results, reducing crime, increasing transparency, and reforming a corrupted organization. On the other side, you have Dick Durbin and the establishment focused on process questions, manufactured controversies, and protecting the status quo that allowed the FBI to be weaponized against the American people. The fact that crime is down, that the FBI is working more closely with local law enforcement, that transparency around issues like the Epstein case is increasing. These are all good things. These are the results we voted for. These are the changes we demanded. But the establishment can't acknowledge these successes because it would mean admitting that their approach was wrong and that the reforms we've been calling for actually work. What's particularly telling is how Durbin and others like him approach this hearing. They don't want to talk about results. They don't want to discuss the 30% reduction in Chicago's murder rate. They don't want to acknowledge the historic crime reduction numbers. They want to focus on personnel decisions, signing procedures, and other bureaucratic minutiae because they know that when you focus on actual outcomes, Patel and his team are winning. This is why it's so important that we continue to support leaders like Kash Patel and hold our elected representatives accountable when they try to undermine the reforms we voted for. The deep state doesn't give up easily. They're going to continue attacking anyone who threatens their power and their ability to operate without accountability. But as long as we stay engaged, as long as we pay attention to what's actually happening versus what the media tells us is happening, we can continue to win these battles. The FBI under Kash Patel's leadership is finally starting to look like what we always wanted it to be. An organization focused on fighting crime, protecting Americans, and working with local law enforcement rather than playing political games in Washington. An organization where decisions are made based on operational needs and public safety rather than political considerations. An organization where transparency is the rule rather than the exception. That's the America First agenda in action, Patriots. That's what winning looks like. And that's why the establishment is so desperate to stop it. They know that if Americans see what competent, patriotic leadership actually looks like, they're never going to accept the incompetent, politically motivated leadership we've had in the past. So keep supporting leaders like Kash Patel. Keep holding hearings like this one accountable for what they really are, which is establishment attacks on America First reforms. And keep supporting independent media like this channel that's willing to tell you the truth about what's actually happening in Washington. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and support us on Patreon at patreon.com/AmericaFirst. Your support allows us to keep bringing you this kind of in-depth analysis without the filter of the mainstream media. We're in this fight together, Patriots, and together we're going to keep winning for America. Until next time, keep fighting for the America First agenda.